What can you get access to that's low cost, no cost, building a minimal viable product, or trying to reduce expenses as you're growing your business. And the way I like to do it is for those who are currently operating business, my favorite part of being resourceful is looking at the balance sheet. I like to look at a balance sheet and identify what are the liabilities. How can we monetize those liabilities? That's my favorite type of resourcefulness in entrepreneurship or business growth, because you've already have stuff you're paying for, but how can we turn it into a profit?
Welcome to Forward with NACCE, Inspiring Entrepreneurial Action, a podcast that shares the stories of everyday entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial leaders, and the communities that support us. We hope that this diverse collection of stories brings you inspiration, inspires you to take action, and ignites entrepreneurship in your community as we make our way forward together.
Welcome to this episode of Forward with NACCE. It's 2024, and we're very excited to begin a brand new year of podcasts celebrating everyday entrepreneurs, leaders from all walks of life that give inspiration and give practical knowledge that can help you, whether you aspire to start a business or just aspire to improve your life. I'm Rebecca Corbin, the host of Forward with NACCE, and I'm also the president and CEO of the National Association for Community College Entrepreneurship. And it is my pleasure to welcome today's guest, our first guest of 2024, Dr. Michael Barbera. He has a really interesting background, and so I'll be calling him Michael, but he has some great, not only educational experiences, but really a rich career in business. So Michael, welcome to our first episode. I'm really happy that you're here. And why don't we kick it off by you introducing yourself to our audience? Maybe take us back a little in time, tell us where you are and some of the things that have inspired you to do the work you're doing today.
I appreciate the invite, and of course, Happy New Year. I think today is probably the last day we can socially acceptable to say Happy New Year. So Happy New Year to everyone. Happy New Year, Rebecca. Michael Barbera, obviously. I am a lifelong entrepreneur with a psychology hobby. So I'll start sort of like present day and then work backwards a little bit, or skip backwards. I'm currently the chief behavioral officer at Clicksuasion Labs, which is a full service marketing agency with a niche in consumer behavior. And so my former field of study in academia is in behavioral economics, behavioral finance, of course, psychology or social science fields. But then going back, way back to when I was, preteen, I started my first business at the age of 13 years old and had an exit. Luckily, he was fortunate at the age of 17. Started many businesses thereafter. Most were failures. Learned from those failures to contribute to further successes. So I'm still an entrepreneur to this day with a psychology hobby, and I always try to make the biggest impact wherever I am included.
I love that. And it just really comes through that you're always kind of reinventing yourself. And, on this network and the work that we do at NACCE, we talk a lot about the framework of effectuation that was started by Dr. Sarah Sarasvathy out of the Darden School. And she speaks a lot about bird in hand assets. And so why don't we go back a little bit further in time? Because now you have our curiosity about this business that you started when you were 13. So tell us what the business was and how you kind of grew it to exit out when you were 17.
All right. So at 13 years of age, I was a drummer in a rock band. And when you're 13 and you're in a band, you have this perception that your entire life's going to be as a rock star on tour. I have long hair now. This is COVID hair. I've had short hair my entire life. So obviously I'm not a rock star and I didn't go on tour. But as a drummer in a band at 13 years of age, all the other people in the band were about 17 or 18 years of age. And we would have this large Halloween party in our guitarist's backyard. Now, this is in New York City. So if you have a backyard, that's kind of awesome, right? That's some real estate. And this one year, the guitarist's parents were selling the home, so we couldn't use the backyard. And I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be another way to still put on this concert. And pre-internet days, I get on the telephone and I start calling all these venues throughout New York City, from the large Roseland Ballroom to the small Knights of Columbus and the VFWs. I find this venue out in Staten Island, New York, called The Caves. It's a really cool venue. It's a former brewery. It's got caves in the bedrock, 2 stages, 5 bars. Now at 13 years of age, I look like I was 22. So if I walked in this venue, no one questioned my validity being there, as long as I didn't drink any alcohol and, of course, abuse the privilege. I introduced myself to the owner, operator, or manager of the club, and I explained what I wanted to do. I wanted to rent this facility and then, put on this, all day concert. So he says, let's do it. And the only thing I knew at 13 about, business was, revenue minus expenses equals profit. I didn't say it as fancy when I was 13, but pretty much don't spend more than you make. How hard could it be, right? Every entrepreneur's famous words. And so they put on this event, all day concert, 22 bands, 2 stages, and made a profit. And the owner, manager of the club said, let's do it again, and let's do it again, and let's do it again. And it became a business. It became Jam Productions. It was a concert promotion agency that kind of morphed into a booking agency for artists throughout the greater tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and of course, upstate New York as well. Now, the owner of the club was AJ Pero. AJ was the drummer for Twisted Sister, became sort of my unofficial mentor in business. We didn't sit down and have conversations about what I should and should not do, but I learned a lot from observing what he did and, of course, what he did not do. Now, that business was acquired by a company called Catalyst Promotions. They're still in business today out of Tampa, Florida. But during that entrepreneurial journey as a teenager and growing this business, I would kind of pause and stop and watch how people would engage with merchandise booths from the bands or the bars. And I would be kind of curious of how people would make decisions. And at this time, I didn't know there's a field of study of behavioral economics or social sciences for that kind of stuff. And then it just kind of piqued my interest. But that was kind of the foundation for how I got to where I am today.
That is such an interesting story. And you may not know this about NACCE, but we wrapped up our last annual conference in Nashville, Tennessee. So we were looking at entrepreneurship across the music industry because we were in Music City. And in 2024, this year in mid-October, we're going to be up in Minneapolis, which is the home of Prince, as you know, and Paisley Park. So I'm going to have to circle back to you on your story because I think you'd fit in very well with some of the things that we have planned. And what a great success. So it sounds like entrepreneurship got in your blood. You sort of tapped into your curiosity with what makes people tick and what makes people do the things that they do. And as I was thinking about sort of resources and people developing habits, which, consumerism to me is a habit, it's where you like to shop, it's the things that you buy and so on. But let's jump fast forward into your TED Talk. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that and maybe let people know where they can find it if they want to hear more about it.
That's a great question. So I might struggle here for a moment. It's been so long since I've been involved in gender neutral restroom research, but let me see the best I can do. All right. So I recall that I was in Chicago and I was walking to a restroom, and I walked past the first door. There's a female sign, woman sign on the door. I walk past like I normally would, and then I come across the male restroom, and the male restroom said male and gender neutral. I was like, okay, it's male / in the neutral, but the females had their own restroom. It doesn't bother me, no harm, no foul, but I was curious, why do we have to share? Why can't everyone share? So it kind of piqued my curiosity of why certain restrooms would be shared and some not, and then the decision-making behind why people would accept or be willing to accept gender neutral restrooms. And so just really kind of fast forwarding, what we found is that if the presentation of the placard or the sign on the door is more fun or, aesthetically pleasing, it doesn't really throw gender into, say, the overt conversation, then people are more likely to accept it. We published this research a couple times in some journals, and we made some impacts at some universities and some businesses throughout the country, and some in Europe as well. If anybody wants to watch those TED Talks, there's 2. They can be found at TED.com, and I wouldn't know the extension, but all you have to do is search my name into TED.com, and I'm sure I don't have a common name. I'm sure it'll pop right up.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I just think it's interesting when something sparks their curiosity of why. Because as you were talking, and I watched a little bit of that TED Talk, I was thinking about airplanes, and it's interesting how crammed we are into space. But even in the situation of a restroom, you don't really have a choice. That's what's available to you. But I think it opens the door to really thinking about how do we not only get consumers to purchase things and take action, which we all know, historically, like cigarettes, decades ago, that was, one of those campaigns. And then, of course, then there was the campaign decades later to get people, smoking is bad. Don't do that. But in terms of your work and what you learned in your educational studies, have you come across things that really speak to habits? The reason I'm even asking, I picked up this book. So a lot of times on our program, we talk about different books that we're reading and books that we like. And I don't know if you ever read this one, but it's The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. And what I like about your work is you sort of span both, looking more kind of holistically. And so this book was written by Charles, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, Doug, Duhigg. It was a New York Times bestseller. But one of the case examples in there was about getting people to brush their teeth decades ago. And if you just laid out all the health benefits, people wouldn't always take action. But then they kind of came up with consumer jingles, and it encouraged people, oh, I want a bright, white, tingly smile. And so that kind of encouraged people to take action. And the reason I bring that up is I'd love for you to give us a couple of examples in the work that you do on consumers and looking at research. What are some things that you've found in the course of your work that encourage consumers to take action in certain ways that might improve their lives, obviously improve the entrepreneurs that are offering these products?
That's a great question. I'm going to try to answer that a few different ways. So let's go back to recent times. Let's talk pandemic, and we've all heard the phrase the new normal. And as a psychologist, that kind of hurts me because it takes so much behavior change to really change a habit or create a new habit. So that more than likely us, me and you and many people around the world, we're going to regress back to our normal behaviors prior to the pandemic. So how do we get people to, wash their hands? And we've heard probably the recommendation of, sing happy birthday twice because it equates the time when they have to wash their hands. But then how do you memorize that? So a couple of researchers identified, well, if you were to hang some birthday decorations on your, say, bathroom mirror or by your kitchen sink and put a balloon next to it, it might trigger the thought to say, or nudge you to say, sing happy birthday twice. So small things to just kind of like nudge towards behavior change, those reminders or subtle notifications without being overt. Sometimes notifications can be too overt, like you mentioned, trying to reduce people who smoke, right? The smoking habits. That's really challenging. By putting a label on a box saying this can cause, health challenges or health concerns, probably not enough of a notification to give people the reminder that they should stop smoking. So do it in subtle ways. So some research that we conducted was about hurricane naming and hurricane research. So typically, hurricane, the naming conventions are going to be Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Anthony, Hurricane Sarah, Hurricane Rebecca. And let's say Hurricane Rebecca was coming to Florida, and I'll make believe I'm a Floridian for this conversation. I live in Florida. My neighbor's name is Rebecca. So when Hurricane Rebecca comes, I'm associating the hurricane with the neighbor who I know, like, and trust, and I'm less likely to evacuate or leave and protect
Wow,
my.
interesting.
So therefore, what we found was in several studies, if you change the name from something that is more likable to something a little more terrifying, but realistic as well, people might be a little more likely to evacuate. So we tried some names from pop culture, like Hurricane Cersei's, building off of Game of Thrones. You see this going back a few years. And then we tried Hurricane Deathstron 3000. Of course, people were more likely to evacuate for those names. But also, there's a dichotomy here, is that let's say we started using a little more fearful messaging for naming conventions for name storms in the Atlantic Ocean. After, several name storms being Hurricane Deathstron 3000 and Hurricane Cersei, it starts to, the uniqueness of it starts to wear off and it becomes less impactful. So then you have to try to reinvent the wheel and try a new naming convention. So it may work for, short-term impact, but long-term, it makes it a little more challenging.
Yeah, those are great examples. I never really even thought about that. And as we mentioned at the top of our conversation, we're talking about the new year and gratitude. And I know that's one of the things that can help. People are experiencing anxiety, coming through the holidays. Here we are, we're going into a new year, and post pandemic, we're getting further enough away. But every time you turn on the news, it's like, okay, what's in store for 2024? So maybe speak about a little bit about how can you get your mind to really focus on sort of opportunity in front of you, or your, bird in hand assets, your means, which is really what makes a lot of entrepreneurs successful. What would be things that could help a person, kind of get into that space and get away from maybe a more fearful space?
I like this question a lot. 'Cause I don't get asked this too much. So I want to answer it two ways. Number one, being resourceful, and number two, being, objective planning. So let's start with objective planning. So I like SMART goals being specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. If we say we're going to, what's the January, right? Let's talk New Year's resolutions. Let's put it to an easy context. The most common New Year's resolution is to, lose weight. So let's say I'm going to lose 45 pounds in January. That's not realistic. It's probably not going to happen. So in order to lose 45 pounds, I'm probably going to go to the gym 3 times a day and change my diet, and by day 4, I'm already burnt out and I quit and back to, my normal habits, and I'm not probably going to lose any weight. But if we approach it towards very specific, I'm going to lose 12 pounds over the course of, say, 12 months, a pound a month. That makes it a little more attainable. We have some benchmarks, so a pound a month, and put a little time bound to it as well. And then what do we have to do to then lose 1 pound per month? So we don't have to go to the gym every day, but we can go to the gym 3 times a week and then change our diet the second week. So small increments will help behavior change, because we try to force it all at once. We're likely to burn out and not likely to succeed. So small increments over time, small wins really make the difference. And then that really coincides with the other part of this is being resourceful. So what resources do we have available to us? And that can be in anything. So when it comes to weight loss, is what do you have in your house? Or if it comes to entrepreneurship, what can you get access to that's low cost, no cost, building a minimal viable product, or trying to reduce expenses as you're growing your business. And the way I like to do it is, for those who are currently operating business, my favorite part of being resourceful is looking at the balance sheet. I like to look at a balance sheet and identify what are the liabilities. How can we monetize those liabilities? That's my favorite type of resourcefulness in entrepreneurship or business growth, because you've already have stuff you're paying for, but how can we turn it into a profit?
I love that answer. And I think that also helps with, I think, to some extent, reducing anxiety. Because even in my work at NACCE, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, but we operate very much like a business. Like, we have certain revenue streams. We're not a government supported organization. So we think about where does our revenue come from? And if we know that that stream is tightening up, then we've got to either reduce expenses or, look to expand maybe our product line. Maybe we get our store up and going and have new products. But it gives you that sense of, of maybe not even control, but you have that ability to really manage what might be either great opportunity or challenge. And that leads me to where I wanted to kind of end our conversation, is the work that you're doing today with your company. I'd love for you to tell people a little bit about what you do, the kind of clients that you have, and maybe just an example of some impact that you've made that you're proud of.
More than happy. So Clicksuasion Labs, full service marketing agency with a niche in consumer psychology. So at a macro level, high level, there's 3 teams or 3 departments. There's a research team, which has PhDs in social science, behavioral economics, behavioral finance, and consumer behavior, who research human decision making. They'll provide that research to a client, to peer-reviewed journals, or give it to the marketing team. The marketing team will then apply that research to marketing campaigns for our clients, or then use it in their decision-making processes to make the biggest possible impact on the client's measurable objectives. And then we have an operations team, which does the most work and the least amount of credit, and they hold this whole mess together. But some of the work that we do, we work with, well, sort of clients. We work with clients that are, international, as well as local. So some of our clients include Microsoft, Lend-Lease, the Washington Post, as well as the yoga studio around the corner from the lab. It's very rare we would turn somebody away. We can always try to find a solution that works within everyone's budget. And some of the work that we engage in is trying to bridge the gap between brands believing that consumers are making decisions based upon utilitarian thought processes and experiential thought processes. So at a really high level, most consumers, us, we're making decisions based upon experience more so than utility or transactions. And so if the consumer focuses on price, it's going to be a transaction. And then when it comes time to think about that transaction, we think we can get it for a better price somewhere else. However, if the consumer assumes it as an experience, then they're likely to continue to buy from that brand and have a positive engagement or interaction. For example, let's say over the previous 30 days, for those who are listening, I want you to self-reflect and think about, over the last 30 days, how many purchases have you made? How many credit card swipes? How many checks have you signed? How many dollars have you handed over? How many of those in the last 30 days did you make that sustained life? Meaning that if you did not make that purchase, you would not be alive today to talk about it. For the significant majority of us, that purchase does not exist. For a select few, there might be maybe a healthcare bill or prescription medication. For the significant majority, it's not there. Now you can argue and say, well, Mike, I paid my mortgage. Okay, that's important. We need shelter just for survival. However, we choose the 3-bedroom house with the fenced-in backyard based upon the experience it provides to us. So let's say there's 150 people listening to this right now. All 150, we can live in my kitchen. It's not that large of a kitchen. We can all live in this kitchen. We may not like it. We may get frustrated. We can get mad at each other, but we'll still survive. So we're choosing items or purchases in a category based upon the experience it provides to us. And the better the experience, the more likely the customer is going to return to that brand.
I love that. That is really a wonderful, gives us a lot to think about. And I was reminded of a lot of the books written by Seth Godin, who I'm sure you've listened to his talks, and really that's the differentiator. And when we think about the people that we serve, we try to think, how can we differentiate this experience from others? So I'm anxious to talk more with you offline, but people might be interested in finding you. So how would they find you? Do you have a website for Clicksuasion, or what would be the best way?
You can go to clicksuasion.com. I would say just email me, mike@clicksuasion.com. I have no problem sharing that email. And the worst thing I'll say is I have no idea and try to point you in the best possible direction.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. You gave us some great examples and a lot to think about as we sail into the new year. So I wish you, again, since it's our last day, we can do this. Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to all of the people listening to us around the world.
Happy New Year.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you will continue to explore the many ways to define entrepreneurship with NACCE as we celebrate opportunity, failing forward, and success, learning from one another along the way. Subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and follow @NACCE on social media, and learn more about us at nacce.com/podcast. Stay tuned for a new episode each week. We look forward to making our way forward together with you.